Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Credit Chat. I'm Rod Griffin, Director of Consumer Education and Advocacy for Experian. I'm here to answer your questions about credit reporting, fraud and ID theft, credit scoring, all of those things that are so important to managing your personal financial health and well-being, making sure that you can get the credit you need and access to the financial resources you need when you need them. So if you have questions, it's about having a dialogue. It's about talking to one another, sharing issues, concerns, information, knowledge about how to use that credit report as a financial tool. That's what we want to have happen. So feel free to ask any questions you have. I know that if you have a question, others have the same one, and we'll be able to help more people understand how to use credit well. So that's what this is all about. Please feel free to ask if you have questions. I'll do my very best to answer. Parvenu, thanks for joining. Super Rosie 5, thanks for being here. Again, if you want to know about credit reports and scores, have questions, this time of year, it's getting close to time for those January bills to come if they haven't already. That's always exciting after the holidays, and sometimes not the right ways. But we want to make sure that you're able to protect your credit history going forward, that you understand what you need to do to make sure that it's there to work for you. Your credit report should be a financial tool. It should be something that's there that when you walk into a lender, you know exactly what to expect. You know exactly what they're going to see, and know that you can get the credit you need. It shouldn't be a mystery. It shouldn't be something that is hard to understand or to know what you need to do to make it better. And that's what we really want to talk about. 0123-6544-897. Thanks for joining. Again, if you have questions, feel free to ask. That's what this is all about. Sometimes it's a little hard to get started. We're working on a lot of really interesting stuff, so I'm happy to talk about some things we're doing too. Ida Pearls, thanks for being here, and thanks for the question. So you recently received TPD. However, when the Department of Ed took over, my loans are now reported. Twice in Ms. ZD4. Thanks for joining. Good to see you as always. I'm thinking about twice and went up 100K. TPD. I don't know why I'm a payment plan of some sort. When the Department of Ed took over, loans are now reported, and so they're reporting them on your credit report. I'm not sure why they went up $100,000. That's I'm not sure. But if your student loans are reported, if they're delinquent, they may be charging interest. If you had interest that wasn't paid, that may have been added. I'm not sure what happened there. Typically, student loans are reported during your schooling as on your credit report, just like a regular installment loan, but shown in deferment. So not in repayment, so they don't really affect scores and lending decisions until you graduate, at which point they become active and in repayment, and then they will show that credit history, the payment history, just like any other installment loan. So I'm not sure what happened. I'm missing some detail maybe. Permanent disability. I'm sorry. Ida Pearls. It looks like it doubled. So Department is paying for federal ed. So yeah. So I'm not sure. It's permanent disability TPD shouldn't affect the credit history in any way. We don't. That's not something that's reported to a credit reporting company. All we show is a student loan. So I'm not sure that the two are related. They may be, but it's not from a credit reporting standpoint. It doesn't. We wouldn't show that as being part of credit report. So we don't collect employment status. We don't collect information about income or assets. So regardless of where that income is coming from, or how you're supporting yourself, that's not part of a credit report. So not sure why that would affect the loan or the loan amounts, or why it would double. Certainly would talk to the Department of Education, talk to the loan servicer if they are, and see what they do. Dexit 2, yes, I'm Rod Griffin. Just by way of introduction, if you're just joining, I'm Rod Griffin. I'm Director of Consumer Education and Advocacy for Experian. That's our logo right there in the background. So one of the big three credit reporting companies. And this is Credit Chat. I try to be here every Tuesday and Thursday, 1:30 Central, 2:30 Eastern, to answer your questions about credit reports and credit scores and all of the things that affect you, fraud and ID theft, the areas where we have expertise, and help share information with one another. That's the whole point, is that we can have a dialogue. Can you still apply for a home loan if your student loans are being paid on? Certainly. Sissy AKJ, Jay, I can tell you they can, because I did it when I bought my house, the only house I've ever had, more than 20 years ago now. I had student loans that were in repayment at the time, and they were actually just about the national average, a little less now than the national average for student loans today. And that was, I was paying them off from college 25 years, almost 30 years ago now. So I went through the whole thing that a lot of people go through with student loans, deferred, hardship deferment, forbearance, consolidation, all of those things. But you can, and your credit score went from 843 to 819 because I opened an American Express Platinum card. So I can tell you, we talk about scores all the time. My scores over the last month, and my scores were in the mid 800s, so they, pretty strong, which makes sense. If I'm going to talk to people about credit reporting, I should take care of mine and make sure they're good. But my scores dropped 40 points over the last couple of months just because I've used my credit a bit more, and balances on one card in particular went up a little bit as compared to what they usually have. I paid them on full anyway, but it was used more, and so my scores dropped. I don't worry about that. That sounds like a lot, but it's really not. So if your scores are in the 800s or above, the real impact is non-existent. And the lender's going to look at your scores and go, wow, you're still in good shape. You'll be able to get whatever credit you want. You'll apply and be approved within reason, of course. But it's not going to be an issue. If your scores, on the other hand, had been, say, 720 or 730 and they dropped that much, it might have been an issue of causing you to cross that line. That's when it becomes important. So I always encourage people to look at not only how many points their score changes, but what's the real impact. If you have lower scores, changes in your report tend to result in smaller point changes. The higher your scores are, oddly, perhaps, changes result in bigger point shifts and decreases, but then they come back too. So it's just sort of a cycle as you pay them off and use them well. So don't only look at the point change, but look at where that score is within the range of risk, as we call it. If it's still in really good shape, it's really kind of here and there. I mean, it's not going to affect your ability to qualify. And so you don't need to stress over it, get, like my gray hair that I keep getting. I don't worry about credit score so much. I take care of my credit report, and my scores will take care of themselves. I look periodically and I see them go up and down, but they always tend to come back up and over time. So, and you'll see that they're not just kind of constant, and they don't reach a point and stay there. They'll go up and down as you use your credit more. So be aware of that. And don't panic, but Dexa 2, you're in really good shape. Ida Pearl, so federal student loan, now zero. Transfer your loans to the Department of Education, now it's, duplicated. So if that's the case, if they're showing duplicate loans in your credit report, look at a couple of things. When you get that credit report, get a new copy of credit report. It sounds like you already have, but make sure you have a recent report. And if you need to dispute information, you can go to Experian.com/dispute, and we'll give you a free report if you don't already have a current copy within the last 60 days. So make sure you're looking at a current one. Look at the accounts. It may appear that they're duplicated, but it may be simply showing the history of that debt. In other words, the original account may show on the report, but show closed or transferred or paid. And then you would see the new Department of Ed accounts in the report, so that it's showing the open active account. If there's what we call a final status, a status of paid or closed or charged off, those kinds of things where the lender's no longer opening it, or it's no longer in a repayment situation, it's paid off. Those are there simply to show a record of the history of that account and where it went. It will typically show sold to, transferred to as well, potentially. But if it's showing paid, that's okay. That's not that the debt is duplicated. It's showing that the original lender with the debt, it's paid off. Now there's the new Department of Ed loan essentially for that same amount. And that means that that's the open active account. So look at that too. Make sure the status is right. If the status isn't showing paid or transferred, or something that indicates that it's no longer the active account, dispute that. We should be able to assist with that and make sure that the account status is shown properly with those accounts, so that you'll see them, but it's just showing the history of that debt. So keep that in mind too. That may be the issue, maybe part of the issue anyway. Is that what is in, or is it how much I pay in full every month? So it's the status it's in. So the status of the account. So the lender, the original lender would show the account, and you'll see if an account's open and active, you may see open, you may see with a student loan in repayment. Terms like that show the payment status. The payment history is going to be things like 30 days late, 60 days late, 90 days late, or current. Current's what you want to see. It means they're paid on time. It could be charged off as a loss as another status. I'm just thinking of terms that what you might see. But look for both the account status and the account payment history or payment status, which are two different things. So whether it's in repayment or not, so it's paid, it's in repayment, it's deferred, lots of those kinds of terms. But you should see paid off, so paid, closed, those kinds of terms for the overall account status. And then the payment history status, so it's current, 30 days late, 60 days late, 90 days late. So two different things there. But if you're paying it in full each month and you're paying that balance, that's wonderful. Especially with an installment loan, you're paying the amount that's due. That's going to be beneficial over time. Hirschberger 1, thanks for joining. Why in a credit report is it not actual rating, and what exactly is it? So Prophetess Marva, great question. And there's a lot of itch running in my nose. There's a lot of myth and misunderstanding and misinformation about what credit reports are versus credit scores. They're two different things. Experian and our credit bureau does not rate your credit. It's not a credit rating. Your credit report is not a credit rating, and we're not a credit rating service. I hear that, I see it. We collect and store information in the form of a credit report. And that credit report is used by lenders to help them determine whether or not they should make a loan to you, for example. That credit report is not a rating. It's simply a factual history of how you're managing the financial relationships you have related to debt. And we don't make judgments about that. We don't decide whether it's good or bad. We don't decide whether you should be approved or declined. In fact, the law says a lender has to tell you if you don't get approved that the credit bureau did not make that decision. So we don't rate the information. When you get your personal report, you may see a section that says this information may be considered negative. We share that information because that's often what you're looking for. And is there anything there to be of assistance based on our experience? But we're not saying it absolutely is. It probably is based on our experience, but it's not a rating. So be aware of that. So that section doesn't mean that we're rating it. It just means, hey, these are things that may be viewed negatively by lenders and others. So it's something you may want to address. So it's meant to be informative. So we don't rate the information. That's what your credit report is, just a report. The credit score that you hear about, FICO is a scoring company, Vantage Score, there are others. Lenders may do their own scores. The scores are used, that's the rating piece. When a lender gets your report, they use scores to analyze the information in that report and determine whether or not you will be a good risk to lend to. So they rate the information using credit scores, using a credit report to do the calculation. Kind of complicated a little bit, but just think of it this way. If you're in school, you write a paper, the way, kind of the simple way to look at it, you write a paper for a class. That paper is kind of like the credit report. You fill out the information in it, you complete the work. When you're using credit, the way you pay those bills, how much you charge go into that report. You're writing the paper. When you turn that into the teacher, that paper, the teacher will then look at it and they will grade it and based on the quality of the work you did. Similarly, in a sense, when you apply for a loan, you're turning in that credit report to the lender. They grade it with a credit score, kind of like a teacher, and that represents the quality of that report. So the credit score is kind of like the grade. The credit report is like the paper that you do. If you take care of that credit report and do good work there, just like writing the paper, you're going to get better scores. If you improve the information in a report, you're going to get better scores. So, so we don't rate that. So that's the rating is a separate process. A credit score is what's often referred to as a credit rating. So keep that in mind. They're two different things, and they happen in several ways. A lender can ask us to route a report, ask Experian to route a report through a credit score that they specify when we send them the report. So we route it through an algorithm that's proprietary to FICO or Vantage Score. It's not Experian's. And a score is calculated, and the score and the report go together to the lender, but the score is not part of the credit report. And so that's where that credit rating piece kind of gets mixed up too. So there's a credit score, which is the tool used to analyze the information in the report, and your credit report or your credit history, which is what Experian compiles that's used to do that calculation. Hope that makes sense. Jorge, 1991M, thanks for joining. So I'm sorry, good to see you again. When a collection account status is open, what does that mean? Okay, so that's one of those things I was kind of talking about. Open means it's active. That's the account if you're going to make payments or work with that lender, in this case, a collection agency. That's who you should work with. You should also see the original debt, the original account holder, so probably a bank, and it would have a status of charged off, generally, if it's gone to collections, and probably would see a notation that says sold or transferred to collections and maybe the name of that collection agency. And with that collection account, you'll see an open status, meaning it's in repayment. It's the one you should pay. And you may see transferred from or purchased from, acquired from with that account. So you can track the history of that debt through your report. So open means that's the one you need, that's open. That's the active one. How come PayPal credit doesn't show up on any credit reporting? Kenny H. And the reason, I don't know if PayPal reports it, I can't speak to specific lenders, but I can tell you why that happens. Lenders of any kind are not required to report accounts to the credit reporting companies, so they may choose not to. I don't know if that's what's happening here or not, but the law says, the Fair Credit Reporting Act, which is the federal law, says that if a lender chooses to report information, here are the things they need to do, but it doesn't require them to. So some lenders don't report at all, and very few these days, but some don't. Some may choose to report to one or two, and that's usually a small local bank or regional bank. Most report to all three of the national credit reporting companies. So I always encourage people to ask if you're going to get an account, an open account. Ask them if they report to at least one of the credit reporting companies, because if they don't, it's not going to help build your credit history. So keep that in mind. Not sure if that's the case in this particular instance, but they're not required to. If they choose to, then they have to comply with federal law. They have to meet our reporting requirements and our membership, what we call membership requirements. So they pay us for providing the service of reporting that information and storing the information, managing it. They would have to meet our membership requirements too. It includes other things like security and making sure it's managed properly and safely, those sorts of things. Okay, Credit Repair, good to see you again. Why are there different FICO score systems? I love this question. Where did I go? I tapped my screen one too many times again. So why are there different FICO systems? There are different FICO scores. And what I always tell people is, think about buying jeans. Why are there different jeans makers? It's denim sewn together. Why have not just one? It's kind of confusing. There are different sizes, different kinds of denim. Same kind of thing happens with credit scores. Credit scores are developed specifically to help certain types of lenders make risk decisions based on their customers, as well as certain types of lending to help them determine the risk that a person will repay a certain kind of loan. So you can look at any kind of consumer product. Cars are the same way. If you walked onto a car lot and they only had one kind of car, one paint color with one set of options, you probably wouldn't shop there, and you wouldn't go, why aren't there more cars? You'd say, why is there just one? There should be lots of different ones. Scores are kind of the same way. So if you're going to buy a car, for example, the auto lender, the lender making the auto loan, wants to know if the information in your credit report indicates that you will repay a car loan on time. They're not so concerned about whether you would pay a credit card company on time or not. So there's a specific score that helps predict that. If you're getting a credit card, they have a different kind of score in many cases that help them determine that you'll pay a credit card on time. It's a little bit different than what an auto lender would use. Same thing's true for mortgage lending. Speaking of those jeans, if you go to the retailer, they'll have potentially their own score for their particular credit system to help them determine you'll repay them on time. If you work with a credit union, they're going to have a different kind of score than, say, a national bank in many cases, because their customers have different kinds of behaviors that indicate risk as compared to a national bank customer. So credit union may have, a few hundred or a few 100,000 customers. A national bank might have millions of customers. So they have to look at the information a bit differently. So that's why there are lots of different scores. It depends on the particular lender's needs, the kind of lending that's being done, the kinds of people and customers that they serve, and their kinds of their behavior that they've studied. So lots of different scores. You only have 3 credit reports, and every one of those scores uses the information from those credit reports to do the calculation. That's where it becomes easier. If you take care of your credit report, all of your scores are going to be better, and you can make them better because they all are looking at the same information. They all, in fact, look at key information in terms of things like payment history and utilization rate, the length of history. They're all looking at that same information. They weigh it a bit differently, but that's why they're different scores. And there are competitors in the marketplace. Vantage Score is a big competitor of FICO. Those are the 2 major players in the credit scoring world. Experian, TransUnion, Equifax are the credit reporting companies that are the biggest ones in the country. So they compete, and that reason their additional scores. The Vantage Score is competing with FICO, and they're both working to develop systems that are more predictive of risk, that help people qualify for credit at better terms and rates, and help lenders manage that risk and minimize their losses. So it helps everybody pay less for credit, get access to the credit they need. So that's why there are lots of different scores. It's not that they're making them up just to be complicated. It's because there are different needs, different kinds of lenders, different kinds of lending. So don't freak out about that. Just ask your lender, what score do you use? What's the scale? What does the score I received mean in that scale? If you and often they can provide that and an explanation of it. If you receive a declination notice or an adverse action notice because you didn't get approved or you didn't get the best terms, they have to provide a score they used and an explanation of that score. So you can get that information as well today. So don't panic. There's different scores. Not something to really worry about. Just know that you need to ask that question and then look at the risk factors that go with it. I'm pretty sure a long-winded answer, but I hear that a lot. There should only be one score, and it should only be one scale, and it should only have one set of factors. And it's just not the way it works. It wouldn't make sense, because if you went to buy a car, they're going to want to know that you're going to pay the car loan on time. The mortgage lender wants to know that you're going to pay a mortgage on time, and the things that indicate risk for those is a little different. So that's why we have them. So that argument there should only be one. It's kind of like telling Ford or General Motors or Chrysler, Fiat, whoever they are with now, that they should only make one kind of car, one kind of truck with one set of options and one paint color. It doesn't make sense. So that's what that's about. What's a good score for FHA loan? The Don PZ. It depends. So it depends on actually the mortgage market. This goes back to that score discussion. A good score generally on most scoring systems today and scales is going to be 700 or above. Generally, 750 or higher is considered high prime. You'll probably qualify for whatever you apply for, probably at the best terms and rates. If you have scores of 720, 700, 720, somewhere in that range, you'll probably be able to qualify, but maybe not at the best terms and rates. So those are good versus great. And the mortgage market's a little different than other kinds of lending. Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac are the government-sponsored entities, GSEs, that essentially buy mortgage loans on the secondary market. So after you open a mortgage with a bank, they sell it to Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac. As a result, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac set those rates. They say this is the score that we'll accept to buy that loan. So check Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. They may be able to find out. You might check with your lender. They can tell you, what scores they're looking for potentially as well. Thalmus 24, thanks. K Credit, thanks for thumbs up. Profits Marvith, you're very welcome. I mean, that's why we're here. That's why we want to share information. There's so much out there that's misunderstood. We want to help clear that up. Swamp Gator 62, thanks for joining. Why do employers rely on credit ratings? Another great question. They don't. Another myth. Employers never, ever, and I can't say it enough, employers never, ever, never get credit scores. That's a huge, huge myth. Employers, when they request a credit report, they have to get your written permission to do so before they get the report. And they only get a limited version of your credit report. So it excludes anything that would violate Equal Employment Opportunity Act requirements, for example. So nothing about age as for one item that's removed. We remove account numbers. You don't need those. So they get a limited, or what we call a truncated version of the report. They do not, and I can't stress not enough, do not get credit scores. And you have to give them written permission first. And I'm back to lenders again. Employers don't get credit reports for every position that they hire for. There was a study some years ago that said 95% of employers use credit reports. That's true. Most of them do. But it didn't say is they only use them in a limited number of employment number of positions that they hire. Most of the time, if they're getting a copy of your credit report, it's for a position that involves managing the company's money in some way. So you're going to be an accountant, for example, or if you're like me and you're working for a credit bureau, they might check if I'm going to talk to people about how credit reporting works. They want to make sure I manage my money well. It only makes sense. So businesses use them for positions that involve managing the company's money. Part of it is to help protect from risk. Part of it is just to show that you're thoughtful about how you manage your own money, I suppose. If you're going to be an accountant for a company, they want to know you manage your personal finance as well as also. It would make sense. So that's one reason. The other reason that we see credit reports used most often is actually a security issue. They want to help protect themselves against employment fraud or application fraud. So if a person is applying for a job at a chemical plant, for example, they want to make sure that that person is who they say they are. So they'll get a credit report, compare the identifying information from that credit report and things like your previous employer listing that is part of a report. It's not an employment history, but it usually lists most of your previous employers, or may, and they match that to the application to make sure you are who you say you are, because they don't want somebody getting a job doing something that could be threatening to the public. If it's chemicals that could be misused, things like that. If you're applying for a security clearance in a government role or in our military, they will check a credit report, again, because they want to make sure that part of that process is helping to verify that you're not a risk for espionage, I suppose, or under stress for financial issues that could be create a problem in performing your job role, those sorts of things. So that's where we see them used, but it's limited. You have to give permission. They do not get a credit score. That's the biggest thing, biggest myth, and one of the biggest myths I hear, most common ones. So thanks for that question. S. Austin Smith, what's the best thing to do after a bankruptcy discharge? Continue to do the right things, the things that you're probably already doing, and be patient. Discharge, the bankruptcy public record should be updated to show that it's discharged, but that doesn't cause it to be removed from the credit report. The only public record that appears in a credit report today is a bankruptcy public record. We removed everything else, so there's no civil judgments, things like that. The accounts that were included in bankruptcy, check your report, make sure that they show that they are included in bankruptcy. If they're not shown, you can dispute that information, provide a copy of your Schedule A, I believe is the right document, and it will show the accounts that were included in that bankruptcy, and we will update that information. And then it's a matter of, if you have an account that's been opened, or you can open an account, it doesn't have to be big. It could be a credit card with a small credit limit. Make a small purchase every month, $20, $30, or maybe $10, doesn't matter so much how much, but that there's activity there. Turn around and pay it in full. Don't carry a balance. You do not have to carry a balance to have good credit scores. So make sure you make a purchase with an account that's open. Make that payment in full. That way the account will be reported in your credit history. That positive information will be included in your credit history, and you can begin to have that positive payment history build as the accounts that were included in bankruptcy begin to fall off the report. So as they fall off the report, only the positive information will be left. You'll see your credit history improve. The other thing you can do to help your scores as you're rehabilitating that credit history is use Experian Boost if you would like. You can go to Experian.com/boost, and you can actually have your cell phone payments, your utility payments happen there. But You can have your positive utility payments, so natural gas, water, electricity, your positive cell phone payments added to your report, even things like your cable television bill or your satellite television bill payments added to your report. You tell us what account you pay them through. You give us permission to access that account once a month, capture that on-time payment, and pull it into the report. We add it as an account to your credit report. So you would see the account from your electric company in your report with positive payments. That adds that positive history. When you go through Experian Boost, we actually give you a FICO 8 score at the start and a FICO 8 score at the end, so you can see the change. We're hearing average score increases of about 13 points, and we're seeing people with thin files who have short credit histories actually have an average of about 19 points. So seeing immediate response, and we will capture up to 24 months of information. So use Experian Boost, and it's permission based. You can use it, and if you change your mind, you can tell us to stop, take it off. So really great tool in helping build a credit history. Great tool in helping build a credit history and restore credit history over time. So take advantage of that. That's pretty new. That's less than a year old. Money Dog, good to see you. Thanks for joining. Credit reporting companies are, well, beans and chips, deceitful and shameful. I would respectfully disagree. I think they're, if used well, your credit report for most people is actually a financial benefit because of our national credit reporting system. Credit and access to financial services is lower cost here in the U.S. than anywhere else in the world. It helps drive our economy. You have complete access to the credit reports. You can see what we have in our files. You can dispute it. You can control it. You can actually add positive information to it, and it facilitates financial transactions. Most of us can't afford to live just a purely cash existence today. Imagine trying to buy cars, buy a house, do a lot of things we do. If you want to rent a car, you need credit. So we facilitate those transactions. I always encourage people to remember debt is different than credit. Credit's a financial tool. Debt's a financial problem. We don't advocate for debt. We want people to use credit well. We want people to be engaged in our system. We want you to know what's in that report. So, if there's something in that report, you're the one choosing to use credit. You should know what's there. And we want to work with you to make sure it's completely accurate. So, sorry you feel that way. Hope a little bit longer. It's just a tad late starting. Device N3, if finished paying your mortgage, it hasn't improved your score. Potentially, when you make a major payoff like that, pay off a mortgage, your scores often will dip initially. Don't look at your report right away. Give it 2 or 3 months, maybe a little longer, because that change is substantial. You'll usually see scores improve after 2 or 3 months, come back to where they were, and go up. Having a mortgage payment and paying it off is a really positive thing. So I suspect it's just that big change causes the scores initially to slip a bit, and they'll come back. Why do employers rely on credit? So we talked about ratings. They don't. How do you finish paying your mortgage? And we talked about that just briefly. What should you do after a discharge? Ms. ED4, thanks so much. If you apply for a new credit card with a bank, you have a credit card. Will your file get pulled if the file is frozen? Okay, if you apply for a new credit card with a bank, then you already have a credit card with them. Will your file get pulled even if it's frozen? Rich 33181, great question. The answer is yes, it will. If the file freeze is important to understand what it does and does not do. You can freeze your credit file for free. You go to Experian.com/freeze, and we will issue you a PIN number. And anytime you apply for new credit with a new creditor, they would be required to first. You would have to lift that freeze, give us the PIN number, lift the freeze, so they could access the report. What people don't understand, the notion is that will help prevent credit fraud resulting from identity theft. And there are other tools that are available, may not. That's very limited in its scope. So I always caution people, when somebody says freeze your file to prevent identity theft, it's not true. Freezing your file will not prevent someone from stealing your identity. My identity's been stolen, other people's with breaches and those sorts of things. That's where they steal the identity. A freeze only comes into play if someone uses your stolen identity to try to apply for new credit. So it's a pretty limited tool today. Not a bad one necessarily, but it's just something to be aware of. But there are lots of exceptions. One of them is that your existing creditors can still check your credit report. So they're exempt under the law and can check your report even if a freeze is in place. So they can still check your report when you apply. Toby Smith, 78, if you're just joining, I'm Rod Griffin. I'm Director of Consumer Education and Advocacy for Experian. This is Credit Chat. I try to be here 1:30 Central, 2:30 Eastern, Tuesdays and Thursdays to answer people's questions about credit reporting and credit scoring. So real deal, and that's why we're here. And we've got just a few more minutes. Does Boost cost? No. Juicy Spirits, it's absolutely free. There's no cost at all. What is your bank does not work with Experian Boost? Yeah, and that's the challenge. We're adding all the time. I had that same problem when I first did it. Sissy AKJ, we're adding new banks. We should have asked if we didn't. I'd like to know, but the system usually says who's your bank, and we'll send it through and work with them to try to add it. So occasionally that happens, less and less, but it does happen. Have you heard of these savings accounts? Not much, and I can't really speak to them. Strange. My phone rang. I don't know why, and so I suspect that's what it was. I hung up as fast as I could. I have it shut off, so it's not supposed to do that. So why are there so many credit reporting agencies? So Toby Smith, 78. There actually aren't many credit reporting agencies. There are really 3 national credit reporting agencies. A 4th one called the Novus. I don't hear or see much about that, but there are multiple credit scores, some big and scoring companies. FICO and VantageScore are the bigger players there. So there are 3 national credit reporting companies, but the reports are different than scores. I have a credit history of more than 30 years, but FICO score only shows 23. Your credit, so I'm not sure, that may be a limitation of the scoring system. They only go back so far. In fact, your credit history, in most cases, you may see accounts that say that give an open date, but we only show generally a maximum of about 15 years of history. In most cases, it's 7 years of payment history. So late payments remain 7 years. So that's where it would fall off. So usually don't see that much. So Toby Smith, you say I got a hit from my nose again. It says your score is 766. You need to keep trying to raise it. Keep trying to do what you're doing because you're doing the right thing. So pay those bills on time, keep those balances low. Your scores will take care of themselves if you're doing those things and not taking on too much debt. So worry about taking care of your credit report and let the scores take care of themselves. That's the best advice I can give. Viper 31, can you dispute inquiries, and if so, will it affect your score? You cannot dispute hard inquiries or soft inquiries. Really, inquiries are simply a record that someone's looked at your report. We're required to show or requested it. So we're required to show that inquiry regardless so that you can see who attempted or requested to access it. And it's there in part so that if there are inquiries you don't recognize, it could alert you to fraud. So we don't want to take those off, but we're required to show them anyway. And they're simply, again, they're a record that someone's looked at your report. There's no right or wrong. It's just a fact that they looked at it. Now, if they're fraudulent requests, then you certainly can dispute them as fraudulent and we can help remove them. Removing inquiries isn't going to help your scores. Credit inquiries are the least important factor in scores. They really only affect scores for a couple of months. Soft inquiries only show to you. They don't affect scores in any way. Usually don't see very many hard inquiries on people's reports generally. So can't really dispute them in that sense. It's somebody looked at your report. There's not a lot, or submitted a request for your report. So there's not a lot we can change there. It's simply a record that someone's requested your report. And it's there so that you have full information and can act on it if you need to in terms of identifying fraud and those sorts of things. So we want to make sure they're there. People worry about them from a scoring perspective. Inquiries have very, very minimal effect on scores and only for a very short period of time, usually a couple of months. So if your scores are marginal or not where you need them to be, it's probably because of other more serious issues that you need to work on. Inquiries might push you over the edge if they're not going to put you in a position where by themselves that your scores aren't good. What score do credit card companies give you outlines of credit? I'm not sure. I'm not sure I understand the question, but depending on score, credit card company, the last question I'll answer, I'm running a little long, but wonderful because you asked lots of great questions. If you have a credit card or credit cards, those companies may check your report periodically to review your account as part of what they call their portfolio review. And they may, depending on your history and your payment history, offer to increase your credit limits. It depends on the lender. That's kind of the answer to every credit question, is it depends. So it depends on the credit card company in terms of what they're looking for, what scores they might be applying, those sorts of things. It really depends, but they do review your accounts periodically to decide whether or not to give you a credit limit increase, whether to offer new incentives, those sorts of things. So they do, but the criteria is determined by the lender. So it depends on them. So thank you all so much for the wonderful questions and the great conversation. If you're just joining, I'm about to sign off, but I'm Rod Griffin, Director of Consumer Education and Advocacy for Experian. I try to be here 1:30 Central, 2:30 Eastern on Tuesdays and Thursdays. We're on Twitter on Wednesday at 2 o'clock Central, 3 Eastern on our credit chat. So search Twitter, hashtag credit chat. You can visit our website, ex.pn/credit chat, or experian.com/blog/news/ and I can't see the whole thing because our short URLs were out /about/credit chat, but ex.pn/credit chat will usually get you there. So thank you all for joining. Thanks for all the hearts. Thanks for being part of the chat. Hope to see you all again very soon. I'll try to be here a couple days from now. Tomorrow, we're talking about saving and investing on Twitter. So hope to see you there and share lots of great conversation, lots of great experts with us. And I'll be here Thursday. Thank you all so much. Have a great day, and I'll talk to you all very soon.